Hey guys, it's Jay Calderon with 12ROUNDER Radio. This is obviously for 12rounder.com. I apologize for being a bit late, but technical difficulties, blah, blah, blah. Nobody's interested in that. Also, I don't think anyone's interested in me wasting time, so let's just get right into it. Bit of unfortunate news if you're into heavyweight boxing, which I know is a margin of a marginal crowd that is boxing's community anyway, but if you're into it, it was a bit of bad news as Wladimir Klitschko had a bicep injury and his mandatory challenge against Kubrat Pulev has been postponed till November 15th. Same venue, same place, so nothing there changes. Going to be in the O2 World in Hamburg, Germany, but it is a bit of sad news, truthfully. I mean, it's, every time a fight is postponed, it always feels like, even if it's 2-3 weeks, there always feels like all the build-up, the promo, the event itself seems to lose luster. Then you have to think there was a good undercard under that. If it's 2 months later, which, in this case it is 2 months later, a little more actually, what is the undercard going to look like? How is that going to take place? Do you expect every single fighter to wait that long? So if it has a great undercard and for the event, it always seems like you're jeopardizing that portion of it as well. And sometimes the fights don't even happen the moment that you wanted to see that fight. It just, promoters, matchmakers, so on and so forth, plan these events out pretty carefully. They pick dates and venues and locations and all that sort of stuff very carefully. So when you have to postpone it, while you can still put some thought obviously into what's ultimately going to happen, I always get the sense that the fight just seems to lose a bit of luster. And this fight's actually, Kubrat he's an underdog. I think there's no real denying that. But that having been said, he's a live underdog at the very least, insofar as one can be a live underdog when going up against Wladimir Klitschko. He's undefeated, he can bang a little bit, and, he's accounted for himself well enough throughout his career in the pro ranks. So there was at least some interest there. And at the end of the day, Klitschko ain't getting any younger. So at the very least, if Pulev wasn't the guy to beat him, Father Time might have been. You never know. That's the same sort of feeling you get watching Bernard Hopkins fight, and to a lesser extent Floyd Mayweather. There's always that thought of, he's sort of in, bit of a handicap match here. Yes, he's facing his opponent, but he could also just be facing human realities, nature. Just, things can happen as time progresses. Happens to the best fighters, happens to every single one of them. That's just all that really is to it. The other thing, too, about this fight is the reason it's a bit unfortunate is boxing, in terms of scheduling and things along those lines, has hit a bit of a dry spell, if you will, in that there aren't as many fights coming up. HBO's having something of a hiatus, if you will, over the last month and a half. They're going to be coming back a bit more, obviously, towards the end of the year, but then they seem to even take off a bit of December, so HBO has not necessarily ended the year with as much of a bang, if you will, as they normally do. I mean, at the very least, the last half of the year has been a bit slow. So while this fight wasn't going to be on HBO, at the very least it was boxing, and you were getting something. So that is that component of it, of just being able to see some meaningful fights, is also affected. The other thing too, this is maybe just the way my stupid ass thinks, but the other thing, too, is, with this fight, there was a bit of, as the Brits call it, needle between the two. There was something there. It seemed to be mostly manufactured by Team Pulev, but nonetheless, it was there. And, there was all this stuff about drug testing, and then there was stuff about whether or not Pulev was claiming that Wladimir Klitschko was somehow in cahoots with Shannon Briggs to try to distract from the fact that there wasn't extra drug testing involved in their fight, and there was at least some sort of bad blood there. Usually in a Klitschko fight, the build-up mostly consists of the challenger saying, no, really, I'm gonna win, and reporters and fans alike sort of being like, yeah, okay, sure. At least this fight had people talking. There was some interest there, and again, Pulev has not yet learned how to lose as a professional. So there's all these sort of different dynamics that in the end could potentially come into play. And there was again there was that bit of animosity there. There was that sort of spite from Pulev, and as the fight was getting near, fighters that have been putting in a lot of work for quite a few weeks now tend to get a little more tense, and even someone as professional as Wladimir Klitschko tends to get a little more, shall we put it, fight ready as the fight progresses. So there's always that like, oh yes, this is getting really close. When you have to postpone a fight, like, think about it this way. You're getting into a fight with someone. You're about to fight them physically because you can't use your words like an adult, so you have to fight them. So, you're about to get into a fight. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it first. Or however you talk trash like a loser. And you're getting ready and geared up, and then one of you gets a phone call. And then you're like, hold on, let me take this real quick. And then you have to amp yourself back up to get into that fight mode. You know what I mean? Like, that's... Like, at that point, if you had to stop and not fight for whatever, like, you wouldn't even want to. And I know that I'm 100% positive, as much as a spectator can be anyway, that fighters are different. But it just always feels like, like, what are they going to say on the second run of this promotional tour? Like, oh, I'm still going to beat you. Like, oh, okay. I thought you might have changed your mind since 2 months ago. Of course you're still going to beat me according to you. Like, it just seems even stupider. Trash talk in itself, when you really analyze it, it might be entertaining. Certain fighters are better at it than others. But it is pretty stupid to begin with. When you have to repeat yourself 2 months later and you guys still haven't fought, it's just like, are you guys even going to fight at this point? It just seems stupid. You know what I mean? So there's just a lot of different ways that it can be, it can be affected, this fight, when you have to postpone it. Like everyone else, I hate postponements. Maybe slightly different from other people. I hate it for completely different reasons. But I just always think about that sort of stuff. Like, how do you get yourself back in? Like, I've been in my share of fights as a youth when I was, that was in a past life though. Now I've matured, but sound like I just got out of prison. But I've gotten my fair share of fights, and by that I mean I've gotten my ass kicked when I was a kid, and I could not even fathom, like, saying I was going to beat someone up, and then we just were like, no, next Friday, and then, like, still holding on to that anger. Like, and I'm a pretty angry guy, but to hold on to it for, like, to get up to that point where you're going to potentially harm someone physically, and then you have to dial that back, and then start over again, like, I got other stuff to do. I'm just probably just gonna go, play some billiards online or something, anything else. I'm not gonna do this anymore. Well, it just always struck me as weird during fights like that. But in any event, it is unfortunate that the schedule lost Klitschko-Pulev for now. Again, happens November 15th. It's not so far off. We'll still get it before the end of the year, and Klitschko can take on, if, presuming he wins, he can take on a slightly more interesting name in the winner of Stavern versus Wilder, perhaps, particularly if Wilder wins, just because of the American dynamic there. Wilder unbeaten, big knockout artist, if he were again to get past Stavern. So things could be interesting in that respect. But, having to wait for that sort of clarity to see whether or not that's even going to happen, come on, we live in the internet age. Ain't nobody got time to wait around for things. Now. Should have happened yesterday. But, again, best case scenario, it is rescheduled. Can't really complain all that much. Fight that, coming up now, actually, that has some tie-in to the Klitschko-Pulev fight is, of course, Maidana's rematch with Floyd Mayweather. It's not a fight that had to be rescheduled, but it's a fight that had to be redone. And there is, again, a bit of that sort of animosity that you like between fighters. And, of course, with Floyd Mayweather fights, when Floyd Mayweather decides he wants to get a bit more verbal, he gets more verbal. That's the way he is. Sometimes he's very respectful, very humble. He pays his opponent a tremendous amount of compliments, a la the Miguel Cotto situation. And even in the first Maidana fight, even against Robert Guerrero to a certain extent. But then, the other side of Floyd comes out. Sometimes Floyd puts his foot on the gas a little bit more when it comes to the promoting of a fight, shall we say. The surprising part is, however, that Maidana seems to be speaking a bit more than usual prior to a fight. Usually when you read quotes, you hear Maidana, you see him in interviews on television, what have you, Maidana sort of almost seems like he doesn't want to be there, like he'd rather be, I don't know, practicing looking like he's always angry. I don't know what he does in his free time. My point is, he just seems like, yeah, I'll do all this stuff. I know you guys are paying me hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, so I owe you a few minutes of my time, but if you would be so kind as to let me get back to my other things of, being in children's nightmares, that would be fantastic. But this time he actually seems to be talking a little bit more, which to me is sort of interesting. I actually don't like when a fighter sort of comes out of character that way most of the time, because to me it shows a sign of perhaps a sort of frantic energy, something that's changed about them, maybe a fear or something along those lines. I just think with Maidana it's sort of an exception to that rule, because again, he isn't someone that speaks that way about fighters. He's always a fairly respectful guy. Even if someone's saying something bad about him, half the time it's in a different language, English in most cases, and he's just kind of like, I don't know what he's talking about. And so he just doesn't care. He moves on. But in this case, he seems to be getting a little bit bothered. I find it very fascinating. I find it very interesting, and he's not one to shy away from using the word bitch, which I'm a big fan of. I'm a big proponent of calling men bitches when you don't like them. I just think the word needs to be brought back a little bit more. We have a lot of different words that we use nowadays. I'm not going to go through them here, but the point is, I like traditional throwback words like bitch. They're just quality words. We don't need to get too fancy here, people. A word like bitch does the job, and I like that he throws that word around. I like that he's speaking the way he fights a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that in this case, because again, I think he's just being honest, and he just is kind of tired of Mayweather and hearing whatever he has to say, and hearing that Mayweather and his team call him a bum and all these sort of stuff. Whether or not he understands it, at some point those sort of words are going to get back to you. I don't care how much of a language barrier there is. So it's refreshing to see him be like, okay, look, I'm not someone that usually talks, but at the end of the day, I'm going to beat the shit out of this guy. I don't mind that from him. Again, it's an exception to the rule. Most of the time, if you're a humble, quiet guy, shut the fuck up and be quiet and humble. Don't start changing on me, because I'm going to start thinking the worst, that you're getting scared or nervous or whatever the case may be, and all of a sudden, you're going to, you start getting out of character before the fight. I'm going to think you're going to start fighting out of character, and it's not always a good thing. Most of the time, it's not a good thing when that happens. But with Maidana, I think he's fairly stuck in his ways when it comes to fighting. I don't think anything's going to change about that. And I think he's going to do the exact same thing he attempted to do and had to a certain extent did do in the first fight. And I don't think anything he says is going to affect that. So hearing a guy that is very quiet most of the time and reserved most of the time, come a little out of pocket like that, it's okay. I'll take it. And it's entertaining, so I don't care either way. I don't care whose feelings get hurt here. I just want to see, I'm just in it to be entertained like everyone else. Nothing wrong with that. So it is nice to see him, see him give less of a hoot this go around and, start throwing those words around. Nothing wrong with that in this particular situation. Matter of fact, I even had a rule. I did a rule, on the YouTube channel. You can check that out. Subscribe, of course, get all the updates. Link will be in the description for this particular rule, but it was a rule about fighters getting out of pocket when that's not normally in their character. And again, I explained there, I don't usually like it, but with Maidana, it seemed totally acceptable. Anyway, that about does it for this part, so be sure to click over to part 2. I'm going to be talking about Carl Froch and his future, his options, where is he going to go, what's he going to be doing, what might, be happening there, and get into a little bit more, talk about the weekend's upcoming fights, all that good stuff, so be sure to click over.